Imagine standing on the shore of a peaceful, freshwater lake. It is a quiet morning in Louisiana. Fishermen are casting their lines, the water is calm, and the only sound is the wind rusting through the cypress trees. Now imagine that within the span of 3 hours, that entire lake, all 3.5 billion gallons of it, simply vanishes. It doesn't dry up over years of drought. It is violently sucked into the earth like water in a bathtub when the plug is pulled. This is not the plot of a disaster movie. This is the story of November 20, 1980, at Lake Peigneur. It is a story of engineering hubris, a tiny mathematical error with catastrophic consequences, and one of the most terrifying few hours in American industrial history. To understand how a lake can disappear, we first have to look at the unique geology of Louisiana. Beneath the marshy surface of the state lie massive domes of salt. These aren't small deposits. They are mountains of salt buried underground, remnants of ancient oceans that dried up millions of years ago. For decades, the Diamond Crystal Salt Company had been mining the salt dome beneath Lake Peigneur. It was a massive operation. By 1980, the mine was a labyrinth of tunnels and cathedral-like caverns, some 80 feet high and 50 feet wide, located more than 1,000 feet below the lake bed. It was a separate world down there, a white, crystalline city where miners spent their days blasting and hauling salt to the surface. While the miners worked deep below, the surface of the lake was being utilized for a different kind of energy extraction. Texaco had contracted a drilling company to search for oil. The plan was to drill into the strata surrounding the salt dome, not the dome itself. On that fateful November morning, a drilling rig operated by Wilson Brothers Corporation was positioned on the lake. The crew was drilling an exploratory well, expecting to hit black gold. But they were about to hit something else entirely. The disaster began quietly. Around early morning, the drill bit, which was churning away at about 1,200 feet, seized up. This wasn't entirely uncommon in drilling operations. The crew assumed they had hit a patch of difficult rock, or perhaps the machinery was jamming. They tried to work it free, attempting to pull the drill pipe back up. But the pipe wouldn't budge. Then they heard a series of loud, metallic pops. The massive rig, a structure towering over the water, tilted slightly. The crew on the rig didn't know it yet, but they had just punctured the roof of the Diamond Crystal Salt Mine. The root cause of this catastrophe was shockingly simple. It came down to a map. The engineers planning the oil well had used a coordinate system known as the transverse Mercator projection. However, the charts used by the surveyors on the ground were based on the universal transverse Mercator system. To the uninitiated, this sounds like technical jargon, but in practice, it meant there was a discrepancy in the coordinates. The rig wasn't where they thought it was. They were drilling directly into the salt mine's 1,300-foot level. When the 14-inch drill bit punctured the mine, it was like pricking a balloon, but with the weight of an entire lake pressing down on the hole. The freshwater of Lake Peigneur began to rush into the mine. Salt dissolves in water. As the fresh water poured into the mine, it didn't just fill the space. It ate away the salt pillars that supported the roof of the mine. The hole, originally just over a foot wide, began to grow rapidly. Down in the mine, 55 men were starting their shift. It was around 8:00 a.m. Suddenly, lights began to flash. This was the emergency signal. But it wasn't the water that alerted them first. It was the wind. As water rushed into the mine, it displaced the air that was already there. The air had nowhere to go but out, creating hurricane-force winds whistling through the tunnels. One of the miners, an electrician, later described seeing a wall of water rushing toward him. The mine was extensive, with miles of tunnels. The evacuation plan relied on a single hoist, an elevator that could only carry 8 people at a time. This is where the story turns from a disaster into a miracle. The miners, trained for emergencies, maintained incredible discipline. They raced toward the elevator shaft. The hoist operator, realizing the gravity of the situation, pushed the equipment to its limit and beyond. He made trip after trip, plunging back down into the dark, screaming void to retrieve his coworkers as the water levels rose and the wind howled around them. On the surface, the scene was becoming apocalyptic. The crew on the drilling rig realized the tilt was getting worse. They abandoned the rig, jumping onto a support barge and moving to shore just in time. Moments later, the massive derrick overturned and disappeared beneath the muddy water. But it didn't just sink. It was sucked down. A giant whirlpool, a vortex of terrifying power, had formed in the center of the lake. The hole in the mine roof had expanded from inches to tens of feet, then hundreds of feet wide. The lake was draining. The vortex was indiscriminate. It swallowed the drilling rig. Then it swallowed the barges that were on the lake. 11 barges in total were pulled into the swirling center, spinning like toys before vanishing into the abyss. The force of the suction was so intense that it began to eat the land itself. Lake Peigneur was connected to the Gulf of Mexico via the Delcamber Canal. Normally, the canal flowed from the lake out to the ocean. But as the lake level dropped, the laws of hydrodynamics reversed. The Gulf of Mexico began to flow asterisk into asterisk the lake. The current was so strong that it created a waterfall, and not just a small cascade. This was a temporary waterfall 50 feet high, the tallest waterfall in the state of Louisiana, formed in real time as the ocean rushed in to fill the void left by the draining lake. Imagine the sight. A river flowing backward, crashing over a precipice into a muddy crater where a lake used to be. On the shore, chaos reigned. A local botanist named Jefferson Island was home to the Live Oak Gardens, a beautiful botanical park and nursery sitting on a bluff overlooking the lake. A house located on the property, mere yards from the water, began to shudder. The sinkhole created by the dissolving salt dome was expanding outward, eating the shoreline. The earth cracked. The house, a chimney, and acres of beautiful gardens were undercut. They slid down the slope and were swallowed by the whirlpool. The owners watched helplessly as their property was erased from the map. Back at the mine shaft, the pressure changes were creating physics-defying phenomena. As the mine filled with water, the displaced air was compressed. It searched for an escape. Geysers of mist and debris shot hundreds of feet into the air out of the mine shafts, blowing the lift headframes apart. It was a scene of total industrial carnage. And yet, amidst the destruction of equipment, the loss of the rig, the barges, the house, and the gardens, the question remained. Where were the 55 miners? By the time the last elevator load reached the surface, the water was nipping at their heels. They had driven carts through rising tides in the tunnels to reach the station. Every single one of the 55 men made it out alive. It is a statistic that defies probability. Given the speed of the destruction, even the crew on the oil rig and the local fishermen on the lake managed to escape to shore without a single fatality. The destruction continued for days. It took 2 days for the water levels to equalize. The Gulf of Mexico poured into the crater until the mine was completely filled and the lake was refilled. But the Lake Peigneur that emerged from the disaster was not the same lake that had existed 2 days prior. Before the incident, Lake Peigneur was freshwater, with an average depth of about 6 feet. It was a spot for catfish and bass. After the incident, the lake was saltwater. The depth had changed drastically. Some parts of the lake were now over 200 feet deep. The ecosystem was permanently altered. Freshwater fish died off, replaced by saltwater species from the Gulf. The Delcamber Canal, deepened by the scouring force of the incoming water, permanently connected the lake to the sea's influence. In the aftermath, the finger-pointing began. The legal battles were immense. Diamond Crystal sued Texaco and the drilling contractor. Texaco and the contractor sued each other. Eventually, settlements were reached. Texaco and Wilson Brothers paid out millions in damages to the salt mine and the local nursery. The diamond crystal mine, which had operated for 60 years and provided a livelihood for much of the local community, was closed forever. The company simply couldn't pump the water out. The structural integrity was gone. The disaster at Lake Peigneur serves as a stark reminder of the fragility of the systems we build. It highlights how a discrepancy on a piece of paper, a difference in map projections, can lead to physical ruin on a massive scale. It reminds us that the ground beneath our feet is not always as solid as it seems, especially when we are hollowing it out from below. Today, if you visit Lake Peigneur, it looks peaceful again. The water is calm. The birds have returned. But beneath the surface lies the wreckage of the drilling rig, the rusted hulks of 11 barges, and the flooded ruins of a salt mine, all entombed in a saltwater grave. It remains a hidden history, a testament to the day the earth opened its mouth and swallowed a lake whole. The story of Lake Peigneur is more than just an industrial accident. It is a bizarre chapter in the relationship between humanity and the environment. It is a story where the impossible happened. A waterfall flowed backward, a lake became an ocean, and men outran a flood deep within the bowels of the earth. It is a legend of the bayou that happens to be entirely, terrifyingly true.